Founded back in 1776, San Francisco has grown from a small coastal settlement to one of the most prominent cultural and financial hubs in the United States. With so much to do and see and offer, it can get a little overwhelming. But as with any area of life, when things are too overwhelming, we need to find balance. In today's episode, we'll be exploring ways to find balance in all areas of our life in order to live life to its fullest. Along the way, we'll explore some new delicious recipes from the NEWSTART kitchen, gain some more insightful health information, and encouragement for the journey ahead. All this and more on today's episode of NEWSTART Now. Do you ever feel like you're stuck in a race, desperately trying to catch up to the speed of life, and there's no end in sight? The fact is, we live in a world of competition, and from the decisions of large corporations to the smaller choices that we make at home, the idea of becoming something more has consumed our culture and our lives. This is seen in our homes, jobs, relationships, and even our churches. We've somehow gotten the idea that we need to race through life, gathering as much as possible to become something more. But this overly extended life comes at a cost. We lose balance and we lose sight of what is most important to us. I'm your host, Jonathan Hunter, and on today's episode of NEWSTART Now, we'll be exploring the importance of temperance, one of the 8 components of a NEWSTART lifestyle. First, we'll hear from someone who discovered for themselves that by trying to have it all, they lost what was most important to them. Stick around to find out more.
I was born and raised in Mexico as a child, and I'm on the standard Mexican diet. Well, you know, in childhood, you eat all the meat and the things that your parents provide for you. And later, after we immigrated to the US and we got into the standard American diet, things high in fat and high sugar foods like that, the cakes and the ice cream and the pies and things like that, you just kind of get used to it. About 28 years ago, at lunch, I had a little packet of horseradish and I put on my sandwich. And boy, that gave me heartburn. Yeah, right away, chest pain, you know, heartburn. I went to the hospital and they kept me there a week. You know, they did a treadmill test with me and they checked my heart as I was doing on the treadmill, walking on a treadmill. And then finally what they said was, well, you have high blood pressure. You need to get medication for your high blood pressure. That spicy thing you ate at lunch, it created fluid to build up around your heart. And that's what's giving you that. So eventually my doctor said, yeah, you do have diabetes. You are definitely now, you got full-blown diabetes. And he started giving me pills. And then my blood pressure medication too, I was taking that every day. Eventually, it came to a time when my doctors told me, I think you need to be on insulin now. I remember that was like a shock to me, like, oh, pills aren't good enough now? Different things started happening to me, like I came down with kidney stones. They analyzed the kidney stones. Yep, it was too much red meat. That certain kind of acid. The very first stone I tried to pass, it was blocking urinary tube, and they had to go in and remove it. And then, again, another shocker. It was cancerous, so I went ahead and elected to get surgery. So they removed my prostate. Quite a few months earlier, my brother had come to Weimar, went on this program, went home, kept up with the good program, the exercise, the good food and everything. He had wonderful results, and he told me about it. And so, I was thinking maybe that's what I need to do too. And then my son found out and heard about it too, and he was constantly telling me, yeah, Dad, go do it. Go do it. He knew that I was big and fat, and I couldn't walk and hike with him up in the hills and the trails and stuff like we used to. Finally, I looked it up on the computer, found out that when the next session was going to be, and I signed up for it. I committed and signed up for it, and I came August 8th, it was. My first day when I arrived here, August 8th. And I started learning all these wonderful 8 principles that they talk about here, NEWSTART. And it took me a few days, but finally the Lord started opening my mind and just letting me know, these are the blessings that I want to give you, I want to help you improve your health. And, I could see myself sliding to an early grave. And, but I tell you, since I've been here eating this good food, I don't feel tempted. I go by those places now, and I'm not tempted to want to buy some more of that barbecue beef or the burgers. Now, not only was I addicted to the meat, certain kinds of meat, but coffee. I was pretty much accustomed to having coffee in the morning, and then later in the afternoon, more coffee. After I went through this program, I lost 24 pounds. My first pounds that I lost, I was never, before I came here, I was never able to lose any weight. My doctors kept telling me, you need to do something to lose weight. You need to do something. Well, it's hard to give up that barbecue beef, that Kentucky Fried Chicken, It's very hard to give all that up. But anyway, after being here and eating this good food and exercising every day and being inspired and motivated, no way am I going back, to that old lifestyle that's going to take me right back to an early grave. No, not me. Yeah, my goal is just to keep going with this good NEWSTART program for life.
What a powerful story. Isn't it amazing to see how when you take a step back or when something big happens in your life, you gain perspective and you see what truly is and is not important to have a balanced life. For me, the best place to have that balance is here in nature, secluded from the hustle and bustle of everyday life in the city. The sounds and the quietness allows me to focus on what's truly important. But how do we make this relevant to our everyday lives? Stick around to find out.
Oh, you want me to do this thing?
Yeah, go for it.
You're serious?
Yeah. Take one.
Temperance to me is completely avoiding things that are harmful
Taking care of our body, listening to our body.
and using in moderation the things that are good.
Balance is an interesting thing because probably very few of us have
ideal balance. We're always struggling to have balance.
Big balance that people struggle with today, I would say above everything else, is the balance between work and the rest of their life.
One of the most common areas is too much screen time, too much media. And the average person has between 4.5 and 6 hours of free time every day in this country.
People have a problem with the amount of entertainment that they're hungry for.
But the average person spends over half of their free time on screens.
As opposed to doing something that is productive and helpful, that contributes to their well-being, the well-being of their family, the well-being of society.
We also find that we lose balance in areas of sleep.
Some people sleep too much, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. That's not a good balance, but some people only get 4 or 5 hours a night.
In areas of appetite.
Many of the foods that are sold these days are designed to trigger our brain for a reward system, whether it's serotonin or dopamine or what have you. And so if people are shortchanged on their happiness in other ways, sometimes they'll turn to food or other substances to try and boost that.
Work, sleep, sugar, fat, and then alcohol, nicotine, etc.
Those are all areas where we may lose balance.
So temperance is a big topic, and if you look at every single piece of it, smoking, for example, tons of literature, drinking, tons of literature, drugs, obviously. But also in obesity, there's a lot of literature to suggest that that is a major issue.
If we get off in one area, it is more likely we're going to get off in another area, and it's like a domino effect where the whole life starts to fall apart.
The warning signs of being out of balance are
having problems with your mood, that you're having problems with your relationships.
Irritability is one of the things, lack of sleep, insomnia, anxiety, depression.
And so when you start to have aches and pains, you start to not feel good, you start to lose energy.
Well, stress, fatigue.
When you go into a stressful situation, let's just say you get depressed, you're not exercising, you're getting a lot of stress at work, your cortisol levels go up, your blood pressure may go up, your fasting heart rate goes up, you end up having physical outcomes from that.
Quite a few years ago, I saw a study of actually on mice where they put them in stressful situations. And mice that were overstressed didn't live very long. But mice that had some stress in their lives actually did quite well with that. And then an interesting thing, they took mice that had zero stress at all, and guess what? They lived the least of all of them.
There is a study that was done many years ago called the Index of Life Stresses. And they look at the things and they quantitate it. In fact, loss of a spouse was the item that gave you the most points. I think it was like 80 points. And every stressor, they would assign different points. And they said, if you achieve more than 100 or 120 points in a 12-month period of time, you had like an 80% chance of having a major disease in the next year.
We can't avoid stress, but how we manage it is very important.
I think life balance is a challenge for many, and one of the ways to really work on improving that
is making sure that we take time for adequate devotions. That will improve our frontal lobe. Even getting some nice heavenly harp music or things where we can reflect. We want to take time for reflection.
Our bodies do better when they are on a schedule, when it knows what to expect and it knows when things are coming.
If you personally struggle with intemperance and bad habits, find an accountability partner.
I think the most important thing with maintaining life balance is a strong relationship with God, because He's the one that helps us to see ourselves as we really are. I am easily self-deceived, and it's Him revealing things to me that helps me to see where I'm out of balance. Hi there, I'm Dr. Kuninobu. Temperance is an interesting word that many people can often be confused about. Temperance means using good things in moderation and completely avoiding all bad things. We know, for example, that nectarines, peaches, and plums are good for us. But we also know what would happen if I ate a whole bag of plums in the form of prunes. Yes, even moderation of good things is important too.
With such little time and so many options to choose from, it's easy to replace a healthy meal with a quick fix. But what if it was just as convenient to find something healthy and delicious? Let's head on over to the NEWSTART kitchen to see what our friends have prepared for us today.
Welcome to the NEWSTART kitchen. I'm Margaret Gallant, and today we're going to make some oat burgers. So right away I want to try to get some water boiling, so let me put some water in here. I'm putting 3 cups in, and I want to get that kind of going. All right, so as we get our water, we're going to put some other ingredients. We're going to put 1/4 cup liquid aminos. Get that in, and this is going to make a really nice seasoned water where we're going to put our oats in later. So we're going to put liquid aminos, and then we're going to put a teaspoon of liquid smoke. You don't have to put the liquid smoke in, but I kind of want to make these like a oat sausage. So I'm going to put the liquid smoke in today. I'm also going to put in a tablespoon of chicken seasoning, whatever your favorite chicken seasoning is. And I'm going to put in 3 tablespoons of yeast flakes. So what we're going to do, oh, and don't let me forget, oh, this is the best part. I chopped up diced up an onion, and we're going to put that in. If you don't have an onion, but you have onion flakes, you can use onion flakes also, but I love to have the fresh onion in there. All right, so what we're going to do is let this simmer. We're going to let it simmer for about 4 minutes. So it's going to be a wonderful broth. And then we'll add the rest of the ingredients in a few minutes. We'll be right back after 4 minutes. All right, so we've let this simmer for about 4 minutes, and it's looking really great. What I'm going to actually do is take it off the heat. And then we're going to add 3 cups of quick oats. And I like to use quick oats just because the oats won't show so much when you're making the oat patty. If you have old-fashioned oats and you want to use that, that's fine. You're just going to see them more in the oat patty. And then I'm also going to use a 1/2 cup of ground nuts. And today I'm using walnuts, but you can use whatever nuts you'd like, pecans or cashews or whatever. But I like to use the walnut because it's so good for you. So I'm going to put that in here. And we're going to stir it up, and we're going to let it sit and absorb. So this might take a few minutes. So what I would do if it was me cooking, I would let this sit for a while and absorb all that into the oats, and then we'll come back when we can touch it when it's cooler, and we'll make the patties. So we'll see you in a few minutes to do that. All right, so we've let them sit, so I can now start handling them. They're not too hot, and the water is absorbed up into the oats. So now we're going to start making our patties. So my trick to make them symmetrical and all the same size so they cook evenly is to use a canning lid. So you use a canning lid with the little sealer thing, and what you do is you just put the oat burger mixture in the canning lid like this and pack it down. And then you just plop it down like that, and use a little spatula, and you got a nice little burger right there. So we're going to keep doing this until the pan's filled up, and then we're going to put it in the oven at 375. So I'm using these as a smaller canning lid, but you can use a larger canning lid and make them into a veggie burger type size. But like before, I said I was making them into a sausage patty. So I would serve these with scrambled tofu for a breakfast or something like that. And what we want to do is, if we make a whole big batch of these, then we can actually freeze them when we're all done. And you can have them in the freezer ready to go and just pull them out and warm them up. And it's a great way to have things in your freezer ready to eat. So you don't have to do this every single time you want a sausage patty or a burger. So these freeze really nicely. Yes, and these are, if you go to the store and start looking at veggie burgers made in the store, or actually made, they are full of preservatives and full of extra other things that you really don't want. So this way, you're making your veggie burger and you're knowing what's in it, and you know that you don't have to feel guilty eating these. And they smell really delicious, even like this. So you continue making them, and we will fill up this pan and get them in the oven. And then I'm going to show them to you all baked and ready to go. So we've brought the oat burgers out of the oven after we turned them halfway through the cooking. And we've plated them here, and they just look lovely and yummy. I'm ready to try them out. We've also put our ketchup that we made in another video and our tofu mayonnaise. And it just is a lovely dish. We can use these as veggie burgers or breakfast sausages, and remember, you can freeze them. So make a whole bunch, put them in the freezer, and you can have these oat burgers whenever you'd like. I hope you enjoy.
When something is out of balance, it takes more time and energy to set it straight. So, oftentimes we find ways to compensate, simply get by and leave it for tomorrow. Up next, Dr. Kuninobu will share how out-of-balance lives can impact the brain and lead to addictions.
With us today, we have Dr. Andrew Kuninobu, who is one of the physicians here with us at the NEWSTART program. And Dr. Kuninobu, something we want to talk about today is the first T in NEWSTART. It stands for the word temperance, a word that maybe some of us are not really familiar with or haven't heard too often. I'm wondering if maybe you could define that word for us.
Sure. I mean, it's a very interesting word, and a lot of people today probably misunderstand it, because the modern usage, or the way people tend to use it today, is just moderation in all things. That's kind of the typical way that people look at it. But historically, temperance actually was tied to prohibition and the temperance movement back in the 19th century, which was all about complete abstinence from alcohol. And so the pendulum kind of swung on the usage in America from that to where it is today, where it's moderation in all things. But in actuality, it has to do with complete avoidance of things that are bad, kind of harping back to the 19th century definition, but the moderation part being moderate in things that are good for us. But unfortunately, people have kind of melded it and said, well, moderation in all things, so that's okay to be moderate in, you know, alcohol, or moderate in drugs, or moderate in, and we all would recognize that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In actuality, I mean, would I say, you know, moderate use of arsenic is fine? You know?
Maybe not, yeah.
Maybe not so much.
It certainly lead to something that is quite final.
That's right.
So that leads me to my next question. It almost seems like the opposite of temperance then would be something like perhaps addiction. And is there maybe a term that you could, or a definition you could give us for the term addiction?
Yeah, sure. Addiction has, there's a number of different definitions out there. Classic addiction usually involves things like compulsion, and there's a concept of tolerance buildup. For example, using drugs, for example, let's say heroin or something like that, where somebody may start off using a certain amount and then there's a tolerance buildup, and they have this compulsion or drive to continue to do so. They become dependent upon it. And they find that if they are away from it, even if they get away from it for a while, they tend to relapse easily. And they do all of this despite the harmful effects, either on themselves or on society, family members, or somebody else like that.
So it seems that addiction is more of an issue in the mind, but it has quite a significant effect on the body, which is something that we've been covering here at NEWSTART. So what is kind of the science behind that, of addiction in the mind?
Well, I alluded to it with the tolerance part of it, and definitely has a lot to do with the mind, but it has to do with brain chemistry.
Really?
So it is actually having to do with the body, but in a different sense, in that there are actually chemical changes that take place in the brain. And they recognize now that most things that can be termed addictions, whether it be a substance or a behavior even, such as addiction to media, a common pathways ends up being right in the limbic system where dopamine is involved, and the dopamine system and the reward system. And it's very interesting that there's a lot of biochemical common pathways that are involved in that.
Wow, so it's really something that's affecting our bodies, but it's starting in our minds and has a large degree to do with the chemistry of our minds. So what can you do for maybe patients that are coming to you that have these addictive problems, that are having perhaps negative effects on their physical health, but it's really a mental problem? Is there something that can be done for their physical health to help their mental health, or vice versa?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, first of all, the number one thing is that a lot of people think, well, you know, I know that whatever it is, fill in the blank, is bad for me, but, you know, I'm just going to kind of taper down. Again, they throw in that concept of moderation, and that just doesn't work. In actuality, based on the chemistry and everything, the best thing actually to do is complete abstinence, complete stopping. Because unless you do that, you continue to feed those same pathways, and it's very, very difficult to get the brain to heal. I didn't even mention some of the things that happen, for example, to drug addicts, that it affects not just that system, but it affects the frontal lobe and being able to make decisions, etc. And in order for that to heal, there has to be complete abstinence. And it goes for many of the different things that we get addicted to.
So you talked about drug addiction, for example, but addiction is even something perhaps that could affect us in a way that would be more subtle, that we wouldn't normally term addiction, like perchance in the foods that we eat.
Sure.
Or just other various behaviors that we might have that have a negative effect on our body. What are some things that you can tell people to maybe help them to prevent going into these addictive behaviors or forming these bad habits?
Sure. Well, one is understanding the definition. You know, so often we fall back to the world's definitions of things like moderation and all things. So we think, oh, it'll be fine if I just, you know, have some of this, and then we know it's not the healthiest thing, but then it leads to a little bit more and a little bit more. So understanding that concept and truly avoiding the things that are bad. But keeping the whole body and mind healthy involves actually all the different elements of NEWSTART. You know, eating healthfully to begin with helps avoidance of getting into certain things, obviously, but drinking lots of water, getting our exercise, getting our rest or our sleep, this, you know, of well-balanced life in all these different aspects helps us with prevention as well as treatment of addiction.
So kind of being moderate in all the different aspects of health rather than just honing in on one, but taking it all together can really help us to have that comprehensive health and the self-control maybe to turn away from things that would be negative for our bodies and cause addictions and whatnot. Well, thank you, Dr. Kuninobu. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about temperance and help us to understand more of what this term means, and I hope we can implement these principles that you've shared with us. Up next, we have Dr. Gallant, who's going to be sharing a little more on this topic of temperance.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Gallant. Did you know when caffeine is combined with a dopamine-stimulating event, it can create lifelong habits? The release of dopamine is triggered by things like sugar, fat, carbonation, intense flavors and aromas, and pleasing sights and sounds. Specialty coffees often contain large amounts of sugar, fat, and appealing flavors and aromas. This can turn an occasional coffee drinker into an addicted repeat customer. So instead of another cup of caffeine, why not grab a bottle of water? With 0 calories, natural minerals, and no side effects, it's a good habit worth repeating.
There's nothing like escaping to the peace and quiet of nature to get away from the craziness of life and to gain perspective. Many of us find ourselves in a conflict between our tendencies, desires, and what we know is best for us. Perhaps you found yourself in this conflict and would like to make better choices and live a life of temperance. Up next, Dean Collin will share how to go through life with someone that could help us find balance and peace.
From as early as the 19th century, the temperance movement has fought valiantly against the purchase, selling, and consumption of alcohol, citing its obvious destructive tendencies, leading countless individuals, their families, and even whole communities in its wake. True temperance, however, is concerned with more than just alcohol consumption. The Apostle Paul, when writing about what a life that is truly directed by the Spirit of God looks like, specifically mentioned the word temperance, except he used the Greek word enkrateia, which is far more akin to what you and I would call self-control. What I'm trying to say is, you may not be given to drunkenness, but if you find yourself frequently losing your temper, or living a lazy and slothful life, or even just consistently seeking self-pleasure, that too is intemperate. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is the perfect example of what a truly temperate man looks like. 33.5 years, and he never once lost his self-control. At one point, he was led into the wilderness for a battle of the ages, where he would go toe-to-toe with his ancient foe, the Satan. Except this wasn't a battle of swords and shields, no. It was a test of integrity, morality, and true devotion. Jesus prepared for this, not by stocking up on protein bars and spending countless hours in the gym, but instead by departing to a place of isolation, where there he would spend an entire 40 days without food or water, because Jesus knew that true strength is born of discipline. And if self-control was the standard for Jesus, then it should be for our New Start too.
We hope that you found today's program to be helpful, and perhaps you'd like something a little bit more in depth. Our New Start Online program is just for you. Our program offers 30+ health presentations, pre-recorded by our New Start medical team, delicious whole food plant-based recipes from the kitchen, more encouragement from Dean and others, and the resources necessary to make a change that will last. All this and more is at your fingertips, so visit the link below to start your New Start Online free trial today. And as you think about what you've learned in today's program, challenge yourself to identify areas in your life that are out of balance. Focus in on one of these and use some of the New Start Now tips, and I'm confident that you'll experience a change that will last. Until next time, I'm your host, Jonathan Hunter, and remember, it's never too late to make a new start now.
Graduation day, we just got out of NEWSTART. It's a new start for us. I was freed from depression and from worry, and I have my aches and pains are gone. This was a wonderful program.
I think what I love the most about Weimar is how we begin a session with lots of people without hope, people with pain, people who are frustrated and have no other solution. And then at 2 weeks later, or even a week later, you can start seeing the changes. And by the time we're ready to leave, it's just a miracle. We are all so changed. We are all so hopeful, filled physically, spiritually, emotionally, socially. We are just so filled.